Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live, coming to you every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And this being Tuesday, we're super excited because every Tuesday we bring you pitch deck reviews. Not only do we talk about, hey, raising that funding, no matter what stage you are, we ask, does it unicorn? Very important to ask those questions. Not to say it has to unicorn, but it's a pretty good conversation to have. Will, I'm curious. We're just going to start right off. What are your thoughts on founders wanting to build unicorns?
Yeah, I was reading a stat today about the number of IPOs because, it's been bad, right? So the short version is this. In 2021 was a record number of tech IPOs. So if we're talking about unicorns, right, that's specifically what we're talking about, right? And let's say the number was somewhere around 250, plus or minus, right? After that, in the 3 years after that, we've been averaging between 40 to 70. Like not even remotely close. And I think 70 is by far on the high end. And these are unicorn IPOs. There are other companies that have nothing to do with our space that are out there. But the problem is there were thousands of companies that were funded at a unicorn level, billion-dollar valuations, et cetera. And the only way those companies get out of that, that go on to become the actual unicorns they were intended to be, is to IPO or have a massive sale. And generally, just nothing's happened. The market's just been brutal. So when we talk about does it unicorn, that's become a much different question, Ed, right? Because who does unicorn? Even the unicorns aren't unicorning. It's been a tough slog.
What is a unicorn? If a unicorn fell in the forest and no one's there to hear it, is it actually a unicorn? These are all the questions we're going to be asking. And we want to encourage all of you out there, use the Q&A box or chat to ask questions. We have the venerable Jen lurking in the chat to make sure that we are handling all your questions. We want you to ask and abscond, derail us, challenge us, throw down the gauntlet, ask us anything, because we're here for you to answer those questions as we go through these pitch deck reviews. And we would be remiss if we didn't tell you that this show is brought to you by us here at Startups.com. Will, what's your invitation? Give me the plug for Startups.com.
I got to say right now, most of the folks that I'm talking to recently are basically trying to get some intel as to what's happening in this funding market. They've got a deck. They're getting out there. They're sending out to lots of investors and not getting the response they're expecting. What I would tell you is that if you're pitching right now, if you're going through this process, hop on the site, reach out to us, talk to any of us, me, Ed, anybody that's here. Let us give you some insight, some intel as to what investors are looking for right now, what they are responding to. Let's take a look at what you're pitching, see if we can refine it a bit. It's kind of what we do. But I think right now, we're still a little bit of nuclear winter. Founders are freaking out. It's just harder to do what we do, raising cash. And so let us help you out. That's what we're here to do.
It is a slow go out there. Lots of things that are changing. It's super exciting. And I think that's important to be a part of the community, Will, and to be able to have those conversations because we get to enjoy insights that other founders, and rightfully so. We're not expecting founders to go and have conversations with general partners, scouts, associates, analysts out there and angel investors. You don't have to have those conversations. We'll have those conversations for you. We'll let you know exactly. Nothing to hide. We're here to help.
Right.
Today, Will, we are going to go through a pitch deck here, and it is auto render AI. Okay, so I'm going to set you up for this, Will, because it's right up your alley in terms of buildings, CAD files, all this stuff. Will,
Yep.
How about you share with everyone? Just give a little bit of context, your little tiny project that you've been working on and the reason you would be interested in this industry.
A few years back, probably about 4 years back, and as you know, my wife and I, we bought some land and we wanted to build a house. And we wanted to build a very specific house. We're in Columbus, Ohio, and we wanted to build like an LA house. Like think of like a super, super modern house, which makes no sense out here whatsoever. So we bought some land where it's all treed around it, so we have no houses next to us. So we could build this monstrosity without looking like idiots. So I take this idea, like my caveman painting on what this is, and I bring it to an architect, and I say, I want, this LA house. And months go by and all this money, and he comes back to me and he's like, perfect. I'm like, this literally looks like nothing like I sent you, right? Like I basically said, hey, I want this Ferrari. And you're like, here's a tricycle, right? Like not even remotely close. Okay. And this is all going to tie back to this product. I go to the next architect, bunch of time and money, same problem. Next architect, bunch of time and money, same problem. Finally, I get so frustrated. At this third architect, I go to what they have is they have like a modeling person, like a CAD modeling person that takes these ideas and they put them into a 3D set, and then they create all the images and renders around them. And so being a tech guy, right, I'm like, what are you using over there? And he's like, well, we use Revit, we use SketchUp, we use whatever. And I'm like, how hard could that be, right? And so I go all the way crazy deep into YouTube about rendering and architecture and design, etc. And I learn everything I possibly can about how to use, in this case, a tool called SketchUp. And I basically get into it and I can't stop myself, right? I designed the entire house, like every detail in the house. Ed, you've seen it. You've been to my house.
I have seen it. Visual confirmation.
Yeah. And so I designed the whole house, and then I find out there's this thing, and this is what we're going to talk about, called rendering, where when you take all these boxes that you've drawn, you start to put textures and images and kind of make it look more real, and you run it through an engine, and it makes it look real life, etc. And I got way into all of that. So at this point, for the house we're building, and it's under construction right now, I have a full 3D model that Ed's been inside of that has every detail in this house modeled out. Everything down to where furniture is, like every cabinet, the actual schematic of the cabinet, everything. And I went nuts with it. So when I saw something here that was using AI, that was putting it together, doing these things faster, yeah, it had my attention.
I think, well, this is a good time to have a conversation. My question to you is, and I've got thoughts about this, in terms of how important is it to try and find an investor who has some type of connection to the problem that you're solving, if that's even possible?
Night and day. When you talk to somebody that understands this market, it's like you're talking to a totally different person. Conversely, when you're talking to somebody who has no idea what your product does, it's such a giant waste of time. You may as well be speaking a different language because you're spending so much time trying to explain to them why what you do is relevant, when what you're supposed to be explaining is why what you do is great. Right? And so what I found whenever I was raising, if within the first 60 seconds I could tell the investor had no idea why this was important, I absolutely moved on. I just got to a point where I was like, you know what? There's no version where I'm going to explain to you why this matters and have you understand it the way it needs to be understood.
Yes, and that's important principle here is you can research investors, and investors will have an entry level amount of information about your industry and about your space. And the worst thing you can do is pitch an investor a CPG product when all they've been doing is crypto, the whole time.
Yep.
So do your research. Yep. And I thought this was really great to introduce this concept because Will is going to approach looking at this deck from a different lens that I'm going to approach it. And Absolutely. You're going to get that all the time with investors.
And it's if we were looking at a crypto deck, you would know exactly what it is. And I'd be like, what does this do again? And why is this relevant? It's fun.
And just to answer some questions in the audience there, if you want your pitch deck reviewed, you're a member here at Startups.com. All you have to do is ask, okay? Ask one of us, talk to your advisors. They're running around all over the place. We'll get you some more information. I'll have Jen reach out to this founder, just made a comment there about your deck. We got them lined up. There's a little bit of a queue, but we're trying to create systems where you can process these decks a lot faster, and we're all for it. We want to help you here. Let's jump into this pitch deck. Auto render AI, instantly convert 2D CAD files into 3D renders. What do you think about that statement right there?
You know what? I understood it right away. You know what's funny here? Ed, we talk about all the time about the visual collateral that you have on your first slide. Now, most of the people that put visual collateral, I'm talking images, whatever, tend to put stuff that's hard to relate to or doesn't connect real well to the concept. The irony is this is a totally visual concept and it has no visuals whatsoever.
Yeah.
And all I thought to myself is you need that thing where on the one side you show that it's all wireframe, and then you need the other side to show that it's beautifully rendered.
That would augment this definitely for sure.
Yeah.
First, problem slide. I'm just going to point out best practice, everyone. What I really like right away is you got problem nice and tiny in the top left corner, and that's good. A lot of people put problem as the biggest font. We want to avoid that. We've got an overarching, stark headline summary sentence up at the top, breaking down the mechanics of it. Let's read it. Over 1 million architects spend thousands of dollars and up to 14 days a month just to turn 2D CAD files into 3D renders. And then we got 1, 2, 3, 4 step, right there. And I guess illustrating the problem. Once again, I don't know, but Will would know. What do you think about this top sentence up here, the headline?
Well, I can always recognize our work. I'm guessing whoever put this slide together has been through our course because I can always tell when it's structured properly.
Yeah.
And so I just want to give credit where credit's due. Sometimes, we look at a problem slide or a headline and we're critical. In this case, I'm saying, hey, you followed the format, which is why it just makes a ton of sense. It opens with who the customer is. The customers are clearly architects. Over 1 million architects spend thousands of dollars. Boom. Okay. I might have changed that a little bit. Again, I'm not being too critical. I might have said, 1 million times 1,000 kind of thing. Architects spend over $1 billion, blah, 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 just to show how big the TAM is, right? Because I don't want the investor to ever do math. I don't want you to say there's 1 in 3 architects. I don't want you to say there's 30% of architects. I don't want you to say 1 million architects spend $1,000 if you already know what that gross number is. Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to hone in on that. Let me double click there. You also don't want the investor to have to interpret vague math to get to a point where immediately I thought spend thousands of dollars. I go, is that really a painful problem? Like I don't know the unit economics behind this, et cetera, up to 14 days. So it's just one of those things where if you're not specific and you don't make it severe and painful enough, then what happens is the investor can interpret it and say it's not a painful enough problem. Therefore, this startup really doesn't have any merit for existing.
You bet. And again, architects spending $1 billion on this problem is massive.
Exactly.
Now, up to 14 days a month, I may not understand the significance of that. In other words, 14 days a month may not seem like a lot for an architect. Like maybe that's just actually how they spend their time. I want to pause there. And I'm not saying this is bad, but I want to pause there and say, this is a very common problem when every founder presents their problem statement. They always do it from the standpoint of understanding the context of their problem. Ed, who's the founder on this one?
It is. I
was going to call him by name. It's not a big deal. The founder on this one probably has a tremendous amount of understanding of the problem, obviously, but their audience doesn't. The audience, by the way, may not know what CAD is, right? Might not know what a render is, just to be fair, okay? I'm not saying you have to dial it that much back, but just keep that in mind. In saying that they spend 14 days a month may not seem like a problem. We might need to dial the problem of 14 days in a little bit. What do you think, Ed?
I totally agree with you. And again, this is the context in which you got to put yourself in the investor's shoes. Now, someone like Will, let's say me and Will, we're in this firm and him and I, we're partners. And Will is going to look at this because he's gone through the experience and he may say, oh yeah, 14 days was the worst experience of my life and all those things. And I would say, doesn't it take like a year to just even plan and build a house? So 14 days is a drop in the bucket, and you don't want to leave that up to chance. And that's where so many founders will, what they say to me is they say, I only want to talk to investors that completely understand my space and all the details and all the nuances that have the technical understanding. And I say, okay, in a perfect world, that's wonderful, but you are taking a major risk.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that. Make sure you try and put in some information and hone it down, just like Will said. Now, Will, here's my next question. Let's do a little deeper of a dive. What do you think about this 1, 2, 3, 4, these slides or these bullets at the bottom?
I understand the goal of what we're trying to set up. We're trying to say it takes a long time, right? I'm trying to explain why it takes a long time, right? But let's walk through it. Property is designed in 2D, so like a flat version of it. Then a 3D model is manually created. Ironically, manual means on a computer. And then, because I'm thinking like those old like dioramas, right? Next, the 3D model is texturized and rendered. That actually does take a long time. Several iterations passed on client requests. Timeline could go on forever. The problem is these timelines don't feel that painful.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? And when we get to the solution, which again, I try to mainly see these for the first time when we do these shows because I want to have fresh eyes like an investor. So I briefly looked at the solution. I feel like we haven't made this problem painful enough. And I just happen to know it's a very painful problem. I just feel the way this looks, we could save people 14 days. And I'm like, that doesn't feel that important. But let's get further into it. And I want to go back to the problem.
Yeah, let me stop and share just an experience that I had working with one of our founders here. And they work in Hollywood production. And they're explaining to me, they said, Ed, X amount % of movies go over budget. And I go, is that a problem? They were explaining this to me and they're telling me, and we had them position it with, these are the number of movies that go over budget and they lose money, costing Hollywood billions of dollars every year when they don't have to be wasting that type of money. And that was the painful way that we couched that problem. And they started getting legitimate VC meetings. Like VCs were saying, yeah, we get it. We're going to do it. And all we had to do was adjust it and do what Will was talking about, couch the problem to be painful in the minds and leave nothing to chance to the investor.
Ed, let me build on that for a second because I want to make 2 points. You mentioned a point earlier about I only want to speak to investors that understand my problem. Years ago, I started a company that was basically what a firm is today. Not the same company. Mine was different company, different name before a firm. But it was allowing you to buy stuff using weekly payments. And as the founder, I assumed everyone would understand why that made sense, right? They did not. I'd roll into VCs and I'd be like, hey, we're going to allow people to buy something like a $400 Xbox using weekly payments. And they looked at me like I had 2 heads. Like, why would anybody want to do that? And I'm scratching my head like, how would you not know why that would be appealing to people? And then it dawned on me. These people have never had a job that gets paid hourly. Right? They have no idea that not everybody has a black card, right? It didn't even occur to me. So I changed my pitch and the pitch opened up with, do you know that more than 40% of people can't afford an expense over $500 in a given week without problems? They did not. Sometimes you have to educate the problem before you can make your solution even make sense. Incidentally, the investor that I went to was Founders Fund. The investor that I went to with this problem initially thought I was an idiot. They were like, that problem makes no sense. But when I couched it properly, it clicked, and they were one of our lead investors.
And on top of which, Will, you did the secret ninja move in providing a novel insight to the investor in a way where they said, holy crap, I did not know that. And I love it when a founder can do that and have me get it in like 30 seconds. And I go, holy cow, I didn't realize that's a problem. That sucks. And that's a big problem.
Exactly. And I think being able to present it like that, to opening it up like that, makes a huge difference, which is why the problem statement is so pivotal to the entire deck. If you don't set up the problem with the right amount of volume being like how big of a problem it is in the right amount of pain, then your solution doesn't resonate, because I didn't see why it was a big problem to begin with.
Yes, I do know the name of the founder. I just didn't know how to pronounce it. It's either Javon or Yvonne. My apologies if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly and I'm butchering it. You can correct me and I will make up for it later. But they have joined us, and so we can have that conversation. Feel free to send us some comments. Let's look at the solution slide. So now we get architects can now turn 2D CAD files into accurate 3D models and stunning renders in minutes for 1% of the usual cost. 1, 2, 3.
I dig it. Now, what I loved about how this was Jeevan like Steven. Jeevan like Steven, well done. The way Jeevan did it was he basically said, here's exactly the problem. It's time and it's cost. And when we got to the solution, he said the solution is exactly time and cost, right? Well done. Okay.
Yes,
he threaded
perfect.
the needle on those two. Super important. Okay.
Perfect.
Now, we kind of have the same process like that we're showing, but I do understand how he's looking to couch it. Now, one of the things we haven't conferred with the audience, the investor, is why the number of days is so important. Again, obviously days to minutes is important, but there's some other facets here. This is just my personal experience. For a lot of this stuff, how well it renders and how well it looks actually has a lot to do with whether the client buys off on it.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, so what happens is when you do this flat 2D model, right, essentially a blueprint, when you do the blueprint, it's sometimes hard for the client to visualize it. It was for me, right? But once I took my model, now I designed it in 3D, so I already had kind of the wireframe. But I started to put textures and backgrounds and in all the objects within it. It was totally different. I mean, again, Ed, you've been to my house. You put the Oculus headset on and you walked around my living room.
I did. Yep.
Right? Like that is way different from a client perspective than trying to sell the vision in a 2D blueprint. So there's something here, and again, I don't want to put words in the founder's mouth, but I always get excited about their stuff, so I can't help but talk about it. There's something here that says these architects are going to be more successful because they can get rendered views of their work into client hands. What I might say, Ed, I might say, here's what architects have to use with their clients now, because rendering is so time and cost intensive. Now they can start to present what's on the far right there in minutes without any of the cost to be able to drive clients forward.
Yeah,
Like,
that's great. That is a big deal. And so if you told me that 9 out of 10 homes go over budget because of rendering and because of client conversations and not doing it, and you can eliminate all that, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for me, which now everything's dropping. And by the way, everyone, this is great. Again, the advantage of having Will being close to the problem, but you're not going to get that. I'm not going to be sitting there looking at this deck as an investor, and you're not going to be in my ear giving me a voiceover saying, no, but this is what happens and this is how it works. Explain it like Will did. And that's the reason you really need to nail this and get it just very concise and clear in this pitch deck form that it stands alone. We talk about this all the time, Will. We talk about it like being a standalone without that voiceover.
Hey, Ed, here's what I might do. And I'm going to key off something somebody in the chat said, Tom said. On the problem slide, let's go back to the problem slide. I might open it up with something that kind of shows, here's what they're presenting now, and it costs, on average, I'm making this up, $3,000 worth of time, and it takes 2 weeks to present this to a client, and we have to do it over and over. And that's kind of what this is saying. But again, what I'd love to see is a before and after to say, here's 3 weeks, I'm just going to make, or 2 weeks, 2 weeks and $3,000 to get to here. Here's now what the clients will see in the same day for $10.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And the contrast has to be how shitty the previous client presentation was and how costly and how beautiful the new presentation is. Now, look, after 14 days, you could get to a rendered version that's beautiful, but we're trying to show that if you could get to it faster, you'd have more client success. We have to point to success.
That is a principle. Let's just generalize it for everybody who's going to be watching this. If you can show that before and after, the current state, here's the pain, you got to do 10 steps, it costs you $10,000. And then you show now the world is so much better. The user does it in 2 steps and costs them $1,000 as a 10x solution. You are going to be doing so much better. Not every startup can do that, but if you can demonstrate that, and that was the big revolution with doing things on mobile, being able to hail a cab right from an app and not having to talk to anybody. Those are powerful pictures, powerful motivators for an investor to experience and empathize with the problem. And if you can do that, man, totally powerful. That is something that you want to do. Well, let's talk about after the solution slide. So we got the solution, how it works, and then we have a key benefit slide. This is not a typical slide, so let's look at it for its merit. It talks about fast, affordable, hassle-free 3D rendering, speed, cost savings, quick iterations, a bunch of information. What about this slide?
You know, honestly, it feels duplicative. It feels like we covered this in the solution. The good news is I think this is a great product with a great value proposition. In this case, though, I think we literally just said the same thing in the previous slide.
Yes. In fact, I think this slide is presented in a way that I understand, like speed. Like I understand that versus the drawing in the previous slide like this, right?
Okay. So what if I were to say we maybe get something closer to this as the solution slide, and then use the previous slide as the how it works slide? Because I noticed that those two were combined.
Yeah, there's a lot of how it works. This is how it works before.
Yeah.
And then this is how it works.
I get why.
Yeah. And then, so riffing off what Will said, if you took something like this and you had an amazing headline on the previous thing, if you just put that headline, right up top here, like this, and you could literally get rid of all this. I think a hybrid of the two slides would be pretty darn cool. And so the whole point, Will, I think we can give Jeevan flowers here, his flowers, in that all the raw material, all the basics are here. Nothing wrong with the unique value proposition. It's just how we're going to communicate and organize the information.
Yeah. And look, from my standpoint, the way you get through this, the way you streamline the deck is through your own iterations, just like this. Just keep showing it to people. Like the best version of your deck will come to the surface if you get enough iterations of showing, preferably to people that aren't investors, right? Initially, so you can get your early reps without getting beat up by investors or burning those opportunities.
Let me ask you this, Will. Why don't we have multiple problem slides, multiple solution slides? We've got so much information that we can impress the investor with. I've got so much going on in my mind. If they just saw it, why can't I use two slides?
Because what we're overlooking in that case is we often have this sense that the investor is hoping to digest as much information as possible, right? That the more we tell them, the more ways that this thing is great, the more they'll appreciate our product. That is never the case. The investor has a tiny bit of attention that they're going to give to this, and we only get to walk away with a single soundbite. So what is the one feature, so to speak, the one problem that we solve? We don't get the opportunity to pretend that an investor is going to remember a dozen things about our product. But more importantly, if it doesn't do the one thing that it does the best, all the other things aren't going to save it.
Not to mention, Will, that the longer you talk, the more you add, the greater the chance of you saying something that the investor is going to interpret wrong, the investor doesn't like. Be clear, be concise, and that shows confidence in what you've got. And those are all things that are working in your favor. Now we get to the market size. The market for auto render AI is architects designing in CAD software, with our initial focus on the 1.28 million architects that work in small to mid-sized firms. Man, that's a good one. And then we've got $3.8 billion a year. And yeah, it's bottom up. We got 3.2 million licensed architects, and we got the SAM, which is where we're going to focus. And then we got the 106 million a year if we reach a realistic revenue target.
Well, first thing, that 3.8 billion should have been the number I used on my problem slide.
Yeah.
Architects spend $3.8 billion per year, yada, yada. Definitely. We always open up with who the customers that's buying and how much they're spending per year, which is or could spend per year. That is always our TAM, which is what we have there. So the problem slide always previews the TAM in the first few sentences or first few words.
Yeah, pointing out the number that we want here that I was looking for in the beginning, because the problem slide right now, as it stands, said millions of architects, and that was a generic number. If you actually told me it's 3.2 million architects around the world do this, well, that to me is way different than millions of architects.
Agreed. And again, if there's no meaningful difference between your US market, let's say I'm being very US centric, your US market and your global market, just use your global market. Again, I would only separate the two or only focus on US if there was something about the US market that was parochial or very specific to how your product. Another thing would be language barriers. It's kind of hard to say this is going to be available everywhere if there are dozens of languages that you don't support or styles you don't support, et cetera. Just be mindful of that.
Well, one of the things is this is an interesting slide because I think it's a hybrid between your method and my method. First time I've seen pull it off. Right here, the headline, fantastic. This is where we're going to focus, right? And then it goes into a Tam Sam Som. So the merits of that, I think it comes through pretty clear for me. Someone doesn't know, I understood this.
Yeah, you know what? I thought it was clean. It was focused. I don't have a lot of pushback here. This isn't exactly how I do it. As you know, this is how you tend to do it, Ed. And in this case, it works.
Yeah, I like it.
Yep.
Traction. So our MVP has 750 firms on the wait list and is growing through organic searches for our solution. Headline. Okay. And then we got version 3 beta launched, customer demand, organic growth.
Touches on everything. You know what? I got to give Jeevan credit. This is textbook how we're supposed to build slides, right? I mean, I just
nice work.
I said I can always tell our work. It's doing everything right, and I'm not saying that because it's our style. I'm just saying it conveys the information you need. I need to know 3 things as an investor when I get to your traction slide. What's the state of the product? What kind of customer demand you have, and what kind of growth you have. Now, in some cases, you don't have one of those. Remove or edit as you need to. Okay, but boom, I already know where this thing's at. It's so easy to digest this. Now, the organic growth, nearly half our signups are discovering auto-render AI through organic search for the solution we provide. I'm not sure if I'd use that. I don't hate it. It doesn't strike me as something very unique to the product, but I don't hate it. What do you think, Ed?
I don't need to see that. I think, again, you're just going to take me down a rabbit hole that I don't need to go down. I would much rather see that we got demand, and then if you just do this, everyone, and it's just a principle here, I think it's worth just stopping for a moment. Sometimes founders go out there and they say, we've got 1 million customers. Okay, great, fantastic, good job, good for you. But then if you actually show me, we got 1 million customers in 6 months and we grew, let's say 10%, 20%, month over month to get there, to me, that's even more impressive. So if you have an opportunity to show your growth in more detail that way, it's just going to work better for you. That's a super hack for founders to use.
Can you go back? I'm going to show you guys a magic trick that I think everybody's going to love. It's a fun tip. So customer demand, over 750 early access signups. Let's assume for a second that those are architectural firms. Okay, 750 firms. Ed, how much do they each spend per year? Let's say it's $1,000. Doesn't matter what the number is, okay? What I'm going to say is we have 750 firms that represent almost $1 million of spend.
Yes.
Already on our wait list.
Exactly.
I'm going to say that again. 750 times 1,000 is 750,000, rounding up for charity. I'm going to call it $1 million. We've got almost $1 million of demand already signed up. You guys see how that's very different? People miss this all the time. If you have early customers signed up, represent them as their buying value, okay? These firms, and I use $1,000, that's way low. It's way higher than that, right? It could be $10,000, in which case we have $7.5 million of potential demand sitting on our wait list. That is a way different traction stat. And I would already say 750 firms is great, but you're leaving the value of that on the table. It's the amount of money that they represent that makes you look like a baller.
Let me push that and generalize it for everybody else. If you can take that and you can say representing, like here's a hack that I've used before, is I say we have X amount of creators on our wait list representing 250 million audience members out there, right? And so you can start adding those numbers. It's not just dollar value. On top of which, I say they've worked with these brands, and I put Coca-Cola and Home Depot and everything like that. So if you can stack your traction with that social proof, so I don't know, maybe we one time had a founder that was working in the real estate space, and they had Sotheby's, and they put that logo there. So keep stacking that social proof.
Don't be shy.
Clearly this founder has done something right to get out there, go and brag about it. Let's continue on. Yeah.
Ed, this is the writer in me. Is modeling spelled properly? I swear modeling only has one L. I could be wrong. I'm not pretending to know anything.
I have no idea. I'd have to ask ChatGPT.
But there's a proofreader in me that keeps thinking it's going to kill me, because that means I would have spelled it wrong if that's true. I don't know what I'm talking about.
We're going to fact check all this over there, and
I could cheat and look it up, but I won't.
Okay. we have some departure in this. Okay. Auto render AI is the fastest, most effortless way to convert 2D CAD into 3D models and rendering. So your customer needs, oh man, Will, this is like speaking right to your heart. Okay, pulling your heartstrings in terms of how slides are done. I can just hear your voice echoing all over through this slide. We got customer needs on the left side, and we've got the 4 competitors on the top, and then we have reimagined the rendering workflow to require less time, effort, and money. It's all about improving this slide. How would you improve it, Will?
Okay, it just needs to say a little bit less. The focus of it, which is focusing on what the customer wants, is spot on. Nailed it, okay? What I want to point out is visually, it's really hard for me to digest this much stuff. If you're not sure, okay, Jeevan, if you're not sure on this, put this in front of anybody. It doesn't matter who they are. Let them digest just this slide for as long as they want, and close their eyes and read it back to you. If they can't, it means it's because there's too much information to remember. They don't have to read it back verbatim. Just gist. Can you tell me 3 things or any of the things from any of the categories? And the reason I say this is because no one is spending time on your slides. They're ripping through your slides as fast as humanly possible. So the more visual weight that we put on the page, the harder it is for somebody to take something away. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to take a look at those 4 customer needs. And I would say, is there something about that you're going to stack rank them? Which ones of those are more important? If you only got the first one right, would people buy your product? If you said yes, that's all we're going to talk about. Do they need there to be a second point as well in order for this to be valuable, in order for people to pick you? Yeah, they kind of do. Okay, then that goes. Do they still need a third? Yeah, without the third, nobody's going to buy. Your product is becoming geometrically more complex every single time you need to stack on another reason why people are buying. The best products are products that do one thing extraordinarily well, and that's it. A dumb example that comes to mind for me is PayPal. In the early days, PayPal just did one thing. They allowed you to email money. Now, they try to do other stuff, generally failed, but most companies do one thing really well, and they have other features, don't get me wrong. But it's that one thing, that core thing that they do well, that makes them who they are. Also, a lot of companies rarely pivot from that.
Yes. So I'm going to just expand on that. One of the ways that you could improve this, I'm just going to break it down. So if we're reading this section here, and speed. Okay, so you got this thing, and yes, we're going to validate that this is a customer need, is they want things fast. But now what I have to do, Will, is I have to actually read all minutes, weeks. I have to compare this. So if somehow you could change this and say under a minute, and then here it's a check, and then X's everywhere else, then that's a simpler way. So to your point, there are ways that we can change that left column to simplify it so that instantly I see the differentiators.
There might be an opportunity to condense some of those categories too. Because auto render and then really AutoCAD, SketchUp, Lumion, Enscape, et cetera, which I'm all familiar with, they're kind of the same thing in as much as they're very complicated. They take a long time. They're very expensive. They all kind of have the same problem. Even when you look at how even compared them, they kind of look the same, right? So wherever possible, I'd want to condense, because what I'm most concerned about is that folks won't remember what we said. And so I want to condense as much as possible. I would love to have 3 customer needs and 2 competitors. That would be ideal.
I'm going to push this and say something controversial with
Please.
you, Will. This is one of those rare instances where I think there might be a way that you could squeeze this into the almighty magic quadrant.
Oh, no, Ed, don't bring me a quadrant, Ed. What are you doing?
Because how simple it can be. And listen, it's worth talking about just for a moment. Well, there's been times where I've tried to do a matrix, and then I just put in a quadrant and they invest, because it's a simple proposition with the proper X and Y axis that investors immediately get it. I go, why not just start with that, type thing. But again, as to your point, when you just arbitrarily put some stuff in to make your stuff look better and it doesn't actually give an analysis, that's where these fall apart. But I'm like, you know what? I would try and play around with some different ways to show it based upon just this information and the industry.
Let me add to that, Ed. When you put the quadrant together and you have the 2 axes and you say one is faster and one is cheaper, okay? Of course, we're in the top right and everybody else sucks. What you're missing when you just present that, and this isn't me pushing back on what you said, I'm just going to add to that. What you're missing if you just present that is the audience doesn't know the context of why the customer cares about faster and cheaper.
Yeah.
So that headline at the top, which did get used in this case, which is why I'm pointing out it's so important, that headline at the top should say customers are looking for a solution which is going to be the fastest and the cheapest, which they can't find elsewhere.
Yes.
Right? Here's how the quadrant lays out. But never provide a naked chart and say, you'll come to the same conclusion I did. Never going to happen.
Totally agree. And throwing it out there for everybody, just come and ask us, and we'll workshop this with you, because I am right there with Will. Even though sometimes it seems like we're giving contradictory advice, we're saying the same thing. Present it in a way that investors are going to get right away, demonstrating why customers care about how you're different. And don't be arbitrary and do like binary. This is black and this is white. We're white and everything else is black. That doesn't work. So we can help you with that. We've done this so many times. It's just kind of like riding a bike for us. We're here to help you, everyone. Let's move to business model. So we're saying credit-based subscription model. Users subscribe to base plan, purchase credits as needed, ensuring predictable recurring revenue with built-in scalability. And then you've got free $69.99 enterprise.
I hate small fonts. Ed, how much do the credits cost?
They cost $69.99.
Are those subscription tiers or those credit tiers?
Looks like the pro plan. So the free trial, light, $69. So it looks like it's subscription plus they've X'd out the numbers for credit. So it's XX per credit and $69 membership.
I still don't know what the credits cost. Do you?
No, it's XX. Like literally, there's two X's here. So we haven't indicated the number.
Okay. And maybe that's something they're still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
But since it's a credit-based model and you're purchasing credits, cost of those credits are important. I've got a lot of software that I use, do a ton of AI software, a ton of like Stable Diffusion and stuff. And a lot of the stuff now is all credit-based. So, or Ed, as you know, you use GPT, and when you get to the APIs and stuff, the tokens are all credit-based. So whereas we used to be very familiar with just what like a monthly recurring model is, I think these credit models are starting to become even more part of the pricing. And so I think we just need to punch up what that is.
Yeah, they call it usage. I probably spelled that wrong. Usage pricing is what they do. But here's what we have to look at. And this is the reason, everyone, you got to battle test your pricing assumptions. Right now, there's a trend that's happening. So if I'm paying, and I literally pay for software like this now, Will, $69. And let's say every credit, just for round numbers, was $1 each. For $69, I got 69 credits, right? To do that. So they just charge me up front so they have consistent, sort of thing. And that seems to be the trend that's happening. And that's the reason I want to encourage. I only bring it up, not to say you have to do this, Jeevan. I'm saying research what's going on and battle test your assumptions.
You know what? I'd also like to see a little bit less text on here, but maybe I separate this, just an idea. I separate this, and on the right in a big square, I say, here's the average of what we think our customers will spend. I think on average, our customers will spend $69 on the light plan, and they'll spend an average of $200 a month on credits.
Something like that, right? You really don't even need any of this stuff over here. Like this plus, the credit costs, just like Will said, would have been sufficient, because great headline explains everything, but all that little front text, we don't need it. Investors going to go do the due diligence, everyone, later on. You don't have to put it all up front, and give yourself an opportunity just to keep the investor engaged, not create that cognitive friction where they have to squint and look at your deck. So that's the principle there. All right, team. We've grown platforms to 50 million users, generated 145 million revenue, proving our ability to build scale, dominate competitive markets. That's your headline. And then we got Jeevan, and we got some stats, facts, and then the CTO and the CPO.
Okay, so I love the headline. It does a few things really well. 50 million users is legit, okay? Now, I have no idea what that 50 million users is even in, right? But it's still a big number. 145 million in revenue. I like the fact that it's specific. Also a big number, okay? This team has clearly done some shit. Okay, where it falls off a little bit, and I understand what they're trying to go for. I don't really know where these guys worked, right? I don't really know scale to 50 million users for what. If you're saying I help build Tinder, that's cool, but like kind of has nothing to do with what this business is. So I just want to point out the third one, collaborated with Fortune 500 brands across B2B, B2C markets. Which brands? I want to see those big logos right there, right?
Yeah.
Right at the bottom of there. Logos are so important if you have them. They can come from two places you've worked, or clients or customers you've worked with in a meaningful capacity. Those things will confer more value and allow the audience, the investors, to say, oh, okay, so they've worked with this major construction company, or they've worked with this major architecture firm. Helps if they're well known, or they came from Google, things like that.
That's to your point, Will. Any one of those logos in a Fortune 500 company is going to be well known. So you're missing an opportunity to truly brag. And that's where I agree with you. It's too generalized. It's swinging for the fences. Kudos. But even if you just gave me a little more information in what industry, and then you added the logos, you just put that together. But here's another really great thing. I want to know, this is a good thing if it's true. I got a CTO. I'm going to believe 50 developers, like this person's technical, but tell me that you built this software and, all these things, and get into the details, use your bullet points, and it's going to serve you so much better for a slide like this. But the foundation is there, Will.
Yeah, look, I think they did a great job of bubbling up their what I call their best of mixtape, my 80s reference there. It just didn't tell me who you worked for, but I see a couple Fortune 500 references, which makes me think that there are brands there that we can easily just drop their logos below and start to build on that.
Next slide, funding. All right, so this has got some redacted information. We're raising X amount of seed round to complete development and acquire the first X paid users. Here's our user funds, key outcomes. What's next?
Yeah, okay, so structurally, they've done everything right, again, which is rare. So I just want to pause for a second. Ed, you and I say this every time to Jeevan and the team. It's not easy to put your stuff up in front and present naked, which is what's happened here.
Yeah.
You were brave enough to let us review your deck for the benefit of countless other founders and did the hardest thing. I've been there myself, sat and watched somebody else critique the deck without jumping in every 5 seconds like, oh, no, you got it wrong, which is so hard to do. So first off, thanks for doing that. Second off, you clearly went through our program and followed it, which makes my life and Ed's life so much easier. And I hope it made your life easier too, really. So Ed, let's go back to that slide. I didn't want to forget giving credit to the founder. So a couple things. Structurally, everything's where it's supposed to be. The most important part of this slide is actually the key outcomes in the what's next. We're raising money to get to a milestone, okay? We're not raising money to never raise money again. That would be awesome, and if you do it, you'll be like 1% of people who ever figured it out. Good for you, but it's probably not going to happen. You're going to raise for 12 to 24 months worth of runway, and you're going to be out of money at the end of that. When you are, we have to know as investors that you've hit a key outcome that will be really attractive to the next round of investors. So this slide isn't about where you're spending money as much as it's about what you're going to get done with the money, which will make you more attractive in the future.
Yes, that last sentence, it's really muddled for me. And what Will is talking about, inflection points, like where are you going to be that investors are like, holy cow, we need to get you more money? Or maybe the inflection point is something like we're going to be default alive. We're going to be break even. We're going to say something that speaks to the investors. This one, yeah, I understand what you're getting at, but quite frankly, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to be able to add more features. Well, to me, that's just generic. That's a given. I'm going to take that for granted. Give me an inflection point.
I'll give you a better way to represent this. What's next? By the time this new platform is released, we'll be able to handle over $100 million worth of transactions.
Ooh, good one.
You know what's great about that? Anybody can use that, right? Who isn't building a product that has the ability to handle more money, right? It's literally what your product does. But that's what I want to hear as an investor, that when we're done with this milestone, we're going to have built an ATM that's ready to spit off some cash, right? So I want that last slide or piece of the slide to be able to say, hey, this is when things are going to get real juicy for us. Here's what's next. And how pumped are you about that?
Yes, for sure. Will, quick thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's kind of bat this one back and forth. How do you feel about putting in milestones of we're going to raise more capital, or say we're going to raise our seed round or our next A round when we get to this point in time?
Don't need to say a thing. That's implied in the very nature of startups and fundraising. Every investor expects you to raise more money. You're going to run into some investors that don't. They're not very seasoned investors. You know, just 2 minutes on this. Every one of you in whatever town you're from, anywhere on the planet, you have what we call the local yokels. And these are people who made a bunch of money maybe in the 1980s in real estate and are going to show in one of your meetings. You're going to be pitching them. They have no idea what you're talking about. They're the people that say we want 50% of your company. They don't understand. They've never heard of what a safe note is, and they don't understand why you're not going to return all the money in profit at the end of this investment. Those are not your investors. They're great people. They're well-meaning. I'm not knocking them, but you've all run into them, or you certainly will, and they're just the wrong investors. The right investor is going to look at that slide and say, these folks are going to be out of money in 12 to 24 months, and I need to know that they're going to be in a position to be able to raise more. And that's the story you want to tell.
Furthermore, and thank you for teeing it up for me to knock it off and hit it out of the park. Furthermore, you leave yourself room to say something that is wrong. You can say, oh, we're going to raise our seed round when you're in pre-seed, type thing. And so don't leave it a chance. And I even go further and say, don't say safe note with this valuation cap and this discount and all this thing. That's all going to come out later. That's all part of negotiation. All smart investors, real investors, don't even pay attention to this. Like, we're just going to negotiate that out. So don't put it in there and potentially hamstring yourself by saying something erroneous. That's my advice to everyone.
100%. Never hard code your valuation into your pitch deck. Just say how much you're raising and what round it is, pre-seed, seed, etc. All you need to say. That's all people need to hear, because as Ed was saying, your valuation, your terms are going to change a lot throughout the course of this process. So whatever you thought they were going to be on day one, let's say you said, we want $100 million valuation for our pre-seed round. And you're like, okay, that'll blow minds. Let's send it out there. And everyone looks at that like, have you guys ever heard how fundraising works? Like, that's insane. And now you just sent that out to a whole number of people that think, this deal is for shit. The flip side is you watch Shark Tank, and you're like, oh, they're going to want 50% of the company. So you say, we're raising $1 million round at a $2 million valuation. And the investor's looking at like, why did they send that? Like that's the worst valuation. Now you hard-coded that too. Don't even bother. Don't send anything.
Yes. And I know what happens is people in the audience will literally like, I can't believe people do that, type thing. And we laugh about it. But Will, it happens. Founders do this. We are not just making jokes. and we're just not like trying to be funny about it. It actually happens, and it really hurts the founders, and that's why we're here. You'd rather make those mistakes with us and have this conversation, maybe a little cheeky, a little embarrassing, but have it with us so you avoid doing that in front of a legitimate investor.
And then just to point this out, the first time I ever pitched for venture capital, I was 19 years old, okay? And the VC asked me, he said, what's your use of funds? What's your pro forma financial statement? I had no idea what any of those words meant, but I instinctively reached into my jeans pocket, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and handed it to him across the desk. He opens it up. Like I can't even imagine what was going through his head. And he opens it up and it has like 5 line items typed in Microsoft Word that says how much I owe my roommate for my college rent, how much my car lease is and whatever. He's like, these are just your personal expenses. I was like, that's not what you want. so when we're making fun of this stuff, like whatever mistake you think you might have made, we've made 100 more of those. So trust me, there's no judgment here because we've been through all this. This is why we know.
I never tire of those stories, Will. You got to keep them coming. All right. So we had auto render, Jeevan. Thank you. That was amazing. Will, we're just overviewing this. What's your summary wrap up in terms of overall assessment, next steps for Jeevan?
Okay. So this is a B+ pitch deck. Nobody gets to an A+. B+ for this stage, I don't know how much time he's put into this, is phenomenal. Phenomenal. Okay. I rarely get to review a B+ pitch deck. Okay. And when I tell people what I'm optimizing for, I say I'm optimizing. I want to get you out the door with an A- pitch deck. And people are like, oh, no, I want an A. You're missing the point. We can't get it past A- until somebody with a checkbook sees it. It doesn't matter what Ed and I say. We'll get you to that A- so you look good. But the actual feedback of what investors are getting back to you is what's going to get it to an A and an A+. So we get you out the door at an A- and we let the market get us to an A+.
Jeevan, we're going to get you this recording. We're looking forward to looking at your next deck. We are emotionally invested in your startup now, so we're going to help take this all the way home. That's it for this one. This has been another pitch deck session for us Tuesdays. Wednesdays, traction hacking. We get into revenue acceleration. Thursdays, we do Q&A, AMA, lightning round of questions. Will's going to be back. Remember, contact us if you want your pitch deck reviewed. This has been fantastic. Love the comments. Love the questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe, share with another founder. Sharing is caring, everyone. And we'll see you in the next show. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, friends.